Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Friday. What a wild week, guys. When you go back and you look at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just rocketing to the upside, volatility coming down rapidly. I mean, the velocity of these moves has been absolutely extraordinary, right? Now, you get into Thursday, though, and suddenly things change a little bit. And there's a little bit more going on, and volatility is kind of holding up. It's actually staying above that 20 level and actually pushing around a little bit. And why? Well, we look over at those big cap names that are also not just the big cap. I'm not talking about the mega caps, but I'm talking about a lot of the names that everybody's been talking about with these huge PEs and all the rest of it. They became stocks that were very much under pressure, and they were absolutely getting pummeled to the downside. You look over at the NASDAQ, the next thing you know, you see down 200, down 250, finish the day down 270 points. Meanwhile, the Dow is almost completely flat. So complete differences in what we were seeing. Now, that dislocation is something that we had seen for a long period of time, but recently we have been seeing the Dow and the NASDAQ moving to the upside in a big way those first 3 days of the week, and we watched that volatility index that was getting pushed to the downside. By the way, interestingly, the volume was very, very low. As a matter of fact, yesterday, we only were a little over 35 million contracts on a day where, when we look back to the last few sessions, 40 plus million, 50 plus million. We've had a lot of very, very high volume days, but yesterday, not the case. As a matter of fact, very, very low volume, especially when you look at the recent trend that we have seen, the average that we've seen. We've been averaging somewhere, call it between 44 and 46 million contracts a day, and then all of a sudden 35 million contracts. So a completely different situation than what we had been facing, and the way that the NASDAQ was getting absolutely sold off. What were some of the names that were getting hit the worst? Well, Peloton, once again, we talk about it all the time, the most expensive clothes hanger, down another 11% yesterday. So that was getting hit pretty hard. Tesla actually was getting hit pretty hard. That was down about 6% yesterday. Splunk was down pretty extraordinary. Okta, a lot of these names, as you're hearing these names, a lot of these very, very high multiple names, in some cases, zero multiple names. But we also even saw some selling across in the semiconductor space as well. Matter of fact, semis, absolutely. Now, I realize they're not a sector, but they are a subsector, and certainly something that we talk about all the time because of the fact of we talk about supply chains and what all that feeds into. Yesterday, the semiconductors absolutely were getting slammed to the downside, down more than 2%, a really strong push to the downside, along with technology itself, which was down about 1%. But it was those semis. You look over at AMD, that was down about 5%. You look at Xilinx, that was getting hit about 4%. NVIDIA down about 4%. And of course, Moderna, which is up and down every single day. Yesterday was one of those days where it was to the downside, but not everything was terrible. You look over at Hormel, that had a really nice number. They were up about 5% yesterday. CVS was up about 4.5% yesterday. You get the idea. Humana was moving nicely. Walmart, J&J, Cisco, some of the old school tech. And by the way, that leads into today as well. We'll get into that in just 1 second, but old school tech is still here and still very, very strong. So what are we looking at today? Well, obviously, inflation numbers were incredible. Everybody's talking about that. We actually had a very nice, big, solid move very early on. Matter of fact, the Dow up about 150 points right out of the gate. NASDAQ up about 130 points out of the gate. The NASDAQ's given back a decent amount. Last I looked, it was up about 80 points. You look over at the Dow itself, the Dow up about 120 points, still kind of holding on for the most part. The S&P was up about 30 points or thereabouts. So a lot of interesting things going on within this market as we get into the weekend. And it's something because we finally cracked with volatility. Now, we'll see where we finish up. It's only first hour of trade. We were under 20. Matter of fact, we were in the 19s. And so that's an interesting development that's come out of this as well. Crude sort of holding right around this 70, very low 71, 71 and a half, in that kind of a range as well. 10 years still below 1.5, but not too far away, holding right around 1.48. So what was really working early? Technology, that was up about 1.5%. You look at the semiconductors, that was up not quite 1.5%, maybe call it 1.3% early on. You had consumer staples working pretty nicely, materials. As a matter of fact, when we opened today, every single sector was in the green. So it gives you a little bit of an idea. Very, very strong opening. We'll see if we can hold on to that. Obviously, yesterday does show that there are times where the sellers come out. They come out in a big way. They certainly did yesterday with the big push to the downside in the NASDAQ. So what are some of the movers that we've got today? A lot of them. But I mentioned old school tech. How about Oracle? We don't talk about this name nearly enough, especially when we talk about the cloud, including myself, but it's Microsoft. We talk about Amazon. We talk about all these other names, but look over at what happened with Oracle. Oracle's up 16% today, a really, really nice bounce. We did have some option paper recently. We did see this stock actually break through that 100 level. That was back when we saw the unusual option activity that we'd seen, and the stock was in the very low 90s. So gives you a little bit of an idea. Still some great unusual out there that's helping lead the way. I talk about Apple all the time. Apple was very active again yesterday. It's been active all week, and they have been absolutely slamming it to the upside. It has been on a sprint I haven't seen, and the options just continue to be bought. We'll see if today's another one of those days. Every day this week, we have seen very large Apple options in there looking for another bullish move to the upside. We'll see if that continues today. Broadcom having a pretty nice day. We talked about the semiconductors just a moment ago. Take a look at Broadcom, one of those names. It's up about 9%. I look over at a name like Mosaic. We don't talk about that very often. The chemical space up about 4.5%. Ford, GM, those are moving to the upside. Cisco, talk about old tech, Cisco up today, and not anything close to Oracle, but up about 1.5%, maybe a little bit more. Moderna getting slammed. I said ups and downs every day. It's one of those leaders in one of those two categories today to the downside by about 11.5%. So a pretty big move, pretty swift move to the downside early on. You look at the airlines, they're all getting hit a little bit today, whether it's Southwest or Delta or American or United, all of those down at least early on about 1 to 2% to the downside. By the way, Peloton, it's down again. Yes, it's down again. And it's trading right about $40 last I looked. So it starts to get interesting at some point. We'll see, but it's a name that I've slammed for a real long period of time. Looks like that was the right decision to make, but at some point, this is a great quality company, and now it's maybe getting a little bit closer after all of the hits that it's taken to being a name. If we look deep down and see, we can see if the numbers actually do make sense. I haven't really looked deep enough yet, and I have not seen bullish paper in here either. So 2 unusuals, and then I've got 2 days with the CNBC gang. I got the noon show today, halftime report. We got Brian Sullivan. He's going to be hosting that. And I've got later on, I've got the Fast Money show at 5 o'clock as well. So a busy afternoon. Let's get after it. So number one, unusual option activity. How about Asher? We've talked about a lot of these Chinese names, the slamming that they got to the downside. We've been seeing a little bit more steady stream of some buying of late in a bullish way that really has stood out. Asher is a name that's hit on a couple of occasions. It's one of the bigger ETFs over there. So that one's interesting. The stock was trading around, or the ETF's trading 40 and a quarter. We had a buyer of 30,000 of the December 31st 41 calls. So basically just barely out of the money calls. They're getting hedged by selling the downside puts. So somebody who's willing to take this risk, selling downside puts, 30,000 of them, buying 30,000 of these calls, and those calls going for about 31 cents. Very interesting to see that one. Next on the list is SLB. Now, we've talked about how we haven't seen a lot of energy. Now we're seeing a little bit of a pickup of energy just this week, a little bit more and a little bit more. So Schlumberger, this one trading right a little bit over $30 a share. We had a buyer of 5,000 of the May 35 calls in this name, going pretty far out. We've talked about this for a long period of time, but we have seen nothing, it seems like, more than the very, very near-term buyers. Well, we're starting to see a little bit more going out in time. We're going out into December a little bit deeper, and we're going all the way out to May with this trade. So we're seeing a little bit more buying, a little bit more time. We'll see if that continues, because it has been a stock market where we have seen a lot of option activity, but a lot of it has been 1 day, 3 days, 1 week, week and a half, and that kind of a thing. So this is a pretty interesting one. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing the halftime report today, and I'll see you at 5 o'clock later on. Have a great weekend.